Greetings and welcome back to another important discussion on my channel. Today I am joined once again by my friend and YouTube consultant as well as media analyst to discuss the current and ever worsening YouTube crisis. Let me first ask thank my friend for joining me. Now, John, we've had in recent times an increasing spike in problems on YouTube, the most recent of which I guess we could call the limited state. Now, the first time this occurred to me, that is an actual limited state video, I think it was Mr. White himself, Jared Taylor. He was, one of his videos was put in limited state. I mean, he is an alt-right guy, and it's understandable why the powers that be on YouTube would go after him. I mean, maybe you could give us some more detail on what limited state is and how it all works in terms of monetization and other factors.
Of course. First of all, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to talk about YouTube. And, a lot has changed since our last talk, but also a lot has remained the same. The interesting thing about limited state is all I can glean from it is that it's very lopsided in terms of the videos that they pick to put in limited state. So you mentioned Jordan Peterson. I mean, all the guy was doing was sitting in front of a bookshelf and reciting some statistics. And thankfully, there's a subreddit called YouTube Limited where people try to aggregate all the videos that are put into a limited state, and you can see a definite pattern. I mean, I have yet to see anything, communist or whatever on there. In fact, I was just watching a video from a smaller Marxist channel, and he was screaming at the end that, all the bourgeoisie need to die and they should be exterminated, even aristocratic workers. And I have yet to see a video like that in the limited state subreddit, for example. And I've seen, some of them, they have to be false positives. I mean, I've seen just historical footage from the Second World War, which I really enjoy. I have a weak spot for any, historical footage, especially if it's colorized, and that's put in there. And then there was even a video of this guy, he's clearly a reenactor, and he was just spray painting his Stahlhelm. I think that's how you say it. Maybe you could correct me on that. He was just spray painting his reenactor, German helmet, and that got put into a limited state. It's quite amazing.
Well, I mean, Jordan Peterson, probably the most notable example, because of his fame and renown, was taken out of that state of limbo or purgatory.
I don't think he was ever put into limited state.
No, okay. But his initial, well, briefly at least, his channel was made inaccessible. Yeah,
his experience is a lot more, circumspect is the word, than even limited state. At least with a limited state, we had, 2-3 weeks of notice, but having your accounts mysteriously shut down and on top of that, your email. Obviously, I've seen YouTube bans of all kinds over the years, but never the kind where they just decide, we're going to terminate your Gmail at the same time. To me, that reeks of somebody at Google, as one of the engineers, somebody managing it, throwing a fit, and then just shutting down all this stuff, and especially too because they didn't about face on it. That reveals to me that it was unplanned, or at least a spur of the moment decision on Google's part, and I suspect it was done to him simply because of how effective he is.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for him, because he is the wealthiest person on Patreon by all accounts. He has
ever
money
out of everyone. Wow,
$55,000 a month at least. Although, as I understand it, he's putting the money into renting lecture halls and create his own online university or something to that effect. But I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that YouTube is not. It was never intended to be a free speech platform. It's a private entity. And the powers that be, what's her name, Susan Wojcicki, whatever her name is.
Wojcicki, I think, but no one really knows.
That they can, if they want to, they can do what they want to do. But it seems to me that the thing is that even if they want to shut everyone down, to use the expression, it would just be a horrible PR debacle. So I think they probably would just look at the more obscure stuff like that Jared Taylor video or what have you. What are your thoughts on how far they can go given given what their desires. And if it were up to them, everything would be, cute cats and dogs, falling down off the couch and making weird sounds. And strangely enough, videos with tens of millions of views of adult women
breastfeeding,
children that are probably a bit too old for that, but hey, that's fine, right?
Yeah, I have to disagree on a few of the counts you made. Take for example, I really think the culture of YouTube has changed a lot ever since the new CEO came in, Susan in this case. I believe she's only been here for 2 or 3 years. And you have to remember, I always perceived YouTube to be just more apathetic, in the old days. Now, obviously, when the old CEO was in charge, there really wasn't such a thing as the alt-right, but pretty much it was an anything-goes platform, and they were content to allow just about anything thrive. And as for your point about limited state, I have a feeling that this is something they've desired, at least in the case of Susan, I can't speak for the previous CEO, this is something they've desired to do for a long time, and I suspect current events are making them accelerate their plans. And of course, the whole advertiser boycott was a good justification to exterminate the kind of content they want exterminated on here. And keep in mind, too, the limited state thing is a very small piece of a much larger puzzle about what's going on YouTube right now. It's a well-timed purge, I would say. You know the old saying from whatever that American politician is, never let a crisis go to waste. That's how I see this taking shape on YouTube's part in terms of limited state.
Yeah, and it really is only, it seems clearly political that stuff that is depicted as right, whether it's...
Yeah, they should call it alt-right limited. That's what they should call it. I'm looking through all this list, half of it's just music videos about Nazis, and then another third is about racial IQ differences. It's the alt-right purge list, essentially.
And it's interesting, is I think you and some others have mentioned that there are a number of gaming channels that, they cover Call of Duty or whatever, and they have guns maybe in the title or actions of violence, and they're suffering, perhaps not limited state, but they're suffering from
demonetization. Yes, correct. I suspect that's an unintended consequence, but at the same time, they're becoming very gung-ho about being family-friendly and monetizable. YouTube has a lot of different ways of telling about what's in a video and what a video is about, and all this is fueled by machine learning. So if YouTube looks at your thumbnail and they can tell if there's a Hitler picture in there or if there's a gun, and that will result in monetization. They scan your tags. And then most importantly, too, this is something I never see people mention, captions are auto-generated for your videos, and I would say those captions are about 80% effective at auto-generating what's being said in the video. So they know what you're saying in the video. Even if you neglect to tag in your video, it's about Hitler or the Nazis, they can still tell just based on what's discussed in the video. And all this obviously is being aggregated through machine learning. And that's why you see, for example, even Call of Duty channels, as you mentioned, being caught in the crossfire. I've seen on Twitter some of them where they've had every single video demonetized because they have guns in the thumbnail. Sure, it's, video game guns, but in the case of them, I would say it's collateral damage.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, even Gopher, Gopher, the guy who makes videos about sort of Bethesda games, you might have heard of him.
Of course.
Apparently, as soon as today, he made a video about how he's going to be appearing on VidMe. Now, Gopher is about as innocuous, blue pill, and harmless a guy as you would think, but apparently, sort of sideline casualty, he's been hit by some of this demonetization as well. So it's pretty interesting that how expansive this has been, I think.
Yeah, in YouTube's defense, part of machine learning is the learning part of that phrase. It will get better at distinguishing. It's a very new system, and they've just unleashed it. And everyone's kind of dealing with the shockwaves of that. And I do think it will improve in terms of reducing collateral damage, but there will always be mismatches or even things that slip through the cracks alternatively. But really, the really interesting thing, though, about limited state is that it's really unprecedented. When the blog post by Google was made about announcing limited state, it came with a tacit acknowledgement that the videos themselves don't break YouTube's rules, they just didn't like them. And one thing that's very insidious about them is that it wipes out the comments and it wipes out the views, and that at the same time kind of creates, even if you watch the limited state video, it creates the impression that you're alone. There's no, it's when you see a lot of other people also invested in something, so you feel comfortable and it feels more legitimate. And that's kind of what's going on with limited state. They're trying to cut that off. So a lot of these, alt-right, wish I could turn back time music videos and blah, 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 they would have tons of views and comments. And this is a great way of making it seem like there's no support on something. So it's a very insidious way of dealing with videos they just don't like, but obviously don't have the justification to purge outright.
Yeah. Well, speaking of comments and views and just sort of interaction, there's, I guess you could say, a type of soft censorship, a type of disincentive involved in, as far as I understand, the way algorithm changes have been introduced, and how that's affected basically how videos are viewed and how you as a viewer get connected to videos. Maybe you can go into some detail on that.
Oh, of course, yeah. Everyone likes to talk about the hard censorship tactics YouTube is taking. That's the most obvious and that's the most aggressive. But by far, I would say 80% of what's going on is actually all the insidious soft censorship angles they're taking, and that's not discussed nearly enough. So I'm glad we can do that now. And not all these necessarily have a political angle. I need to remind people that, yeah, the limited state, I can tell, is definitely a political witch hunt, but YouTube itself as a platform is changing from an algorithm perspective, and for the most part, it's not really bound to one sort of political ideology. I think in general, like, political videos are not really wanted on YouTube, at least in terms of monetization, and I still hold by the fact that it's not just right channels that are getting screwed over by algorithm changes. I think they want all non-mainstream political views pretty much purged from the site. I think the Young Turks will be fine, but people like Dave Rubin, for example, or I forget who that Young Turks outcast is who has that show.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
What was his name?
I don't recall, but he talked to Angela Nagel. Yeah,
I suppose it's not important. Yeah, I'm sure someone in the comments will say. I talked about last time about how YouTube only cares about the almighty dollar, but I still hold to that. I will fully concede that the YouTube limited state is a purge of right content, absolutely. But the algorithm changes as a whole, I would say, are very non-discriminating. At the end of the day, I saw a news article the other day that Procter & Gamble alone withdrew, I think it's like $100 million in ad spending from YouTube, and they're doing that each quarter, and something like that just annihilates the ad ecosystem.
What was the motivation for them to do that, though, specifically?
Yeah, the motivation was that there were two things, actually. Ironically, one of their justifications was that they didn't believe online ads were effective, which actually I'm inclined to agree with. And then the other two was the mainstream view that ads were showing up on inappropriate videos. It's a power play. You have to remember this site really was held up by Procter & Gamble ads for like toilet paper and whatever, and then Pepsi and Coca-Cola ads. And take those out, this entire ecosystem flipped on its head. People love to talk about the strength of alternative media, but as soon as Pepsi stopped pouring drinks on YouTube ads, this whole place turned into a state of chaos.
Yeah, it's interesting that apart from the soft censorship and the way it shifted in terms of its function, algorithm changes, I'm wondering if there are people like Wojcicki, however.
Wojcicki? I want to say it's that.
Anyway, the CEO in the current year. Whatever, if they have a plan at all, is kind of a war of attrition that it's going to be a slow kind of purge over time. Mm-hmm. Of the kinds of content that they don't think is quote-unquote appropriate.
You're exactly right. That's my opinion as well. I estimate, people who are seeking out political content to be max 15% of YouTube's audience. I think we really overestimate the importance of political and even alternative videos on YouTube. I can find individual like kitten and makeup videos that have more views than all of Sargon of Akkad's channel. We need to be reminded of the size of us. So ultimately, YouTube doesn't need political videos, and it would generate a lot of PR if they just took the direct purge option. So I see a slow campaign of disincentivization, through constant demonetization, throttling of views, and a whole bunch of things that obviously we can get into more depth as our conversation goes on. But definitely, on a very broad scope, this is it's a limited war of attrition that's going to slowly grind people down and drive people away. And some people will not survive these, the new ecosystem.
Speaking of this, that there are people who have survived. This, predated obviously the current state of affairs. But for example, when Thunderfoot transitioned from anti-theism to anti-feminism, I can imagine someone like Romy Millennial, who is just an imitative copycat, transitioning her channel to a makeup tutorial channel pretty easily.
I know you want that very badly.
Well, I've been asking her for months now to just fucking post a makeup tutorial because she obviously is very good at it, but for some reason she ignores my request. Maybe if I became a patron, who knows? But I mean, I can imagine someone like her transitioning possibly to something non-political, because I think she's just in it for the money anyway. But a lot of the rest of us, well, I hear things about VidMe and Minds. But here's the thing, and the people don't understand. We've been friends for a while, so you remember. But when I transitioned from Stardust to Thinking-Ape, there was attrition there. In fact, it took me eons to regain the subs that I had at the time. And then people tell me these days, well, get set up on Minds and blah blah blah. I said, well. Yes, some people would watch that and join, but it would be just an enormous rebuilding project. And
yes, it would.
I'm considering doing that, and I probably will do that eventually. It's just, it's not as simple as just channels as small as mine have taken a long time to build up because they don't operate on memes or niches or whatever. I have, actually, Reactionary Expat did a sort of analysis of this. I have some of the worst Patreon support out there compared to channels that are smaller than mine, and there are all kinds of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is, I'm not a niche channel of anything. I just kind of do my own thing. So there's, transitioning is a lot of work. Well, it represents a lot of potential work in the future, and it's not that easy. But I'm not one who's inclined towards optimism, so I don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel. But as you pointed out, there was a time when YouTube was effectively Switzerland, or
exactly.
Upload whatever, we don't care. And maybe this is ultimately reflective of just how politicized everything has become.
Yeah. You have to remember, once upon a time, if you remember back to the days of Gamergate, discussion of that was being censored and controlled in every site, including 4chan, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, all of them. The one place you could talk about it was in YouTube comments, and that was very much indicative of the times. I have to disagree with you on the viability of VidMe and other sites like that. I mean, obviously, it's still very much up in the air, but once upon a time, there was a site called YouTube.com, and they were being sued by Viacom for countless billions of dollars, and they were in full panic mode. And that's the history of YouTube's management and being run. They're always sprinting away from each crisis to the next. So, 6 or 8 years ago, YouTube was overreacting to the Viacom lawsuit by intentionally driving reviewers off the site. People who reviewed movies and TV shows, and they found their home on Blip TV, which I don't know if everyone remembers, but that became a semi-viable platform for people who like to review videos, because just because a certain kind of content was purged off of YouTube, in this case review videos, doesn't mean that the audience for that kind of thing disappeared. And so people were going around and realizing, like, okay, if I actually want to see a good review, like let's say from the Nostalgia Critic, I got to go to Blip TV. And the thing about Blip TV is I believe it was acquired eventually. But, the Nostalgia Critic, I think, made, like most of Channel Awesome's millions of dollars from Blip TV. And that was because, a certain demographic was purged and driven off the site, and they actually managed to rally around that site, and there was good money to be made in that, and it was viable for a time. Now, the dust is still settling with VidMe and Minds, and we don't know if a site can, if a video hosting site can survive just with political refugees and unwanted political exiles, but it's happened before, because I see a lot of similarities between YouTube freaking out about the Viacom lawsuit and then YouTube also freaking about this advertiser boycott today. You see the same kind of overreaction in both cases, and also the result of what happened to the group of YouTube channels that were driven off and how they survived. So I see potential, at least looking back, but it's by no means guaranteed.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. I can understand the idea of gravitating to a new platform for, X genre. Or
I would only do it out of necessity.
No, of course, but Maybe I'm just being nostalgic here, but there's something I've always liked about YouTube is its sort of neutral stance. Now, it is true in this.
Those days are over.
Well, I agree, but in the neutral environment, obviously, fuzzy kitten videos would thrive along with overage children breastfeeding, milks. But there's something nice about that. Now, the thing that worries me about alternative sites is, well, just that. It's sort of alternative. And so sites would become known as, this is the site for, well, the alt-right or the skeptics. And I don't really want to belong to any group. I don't consider myself part of any group. So
that's a good point.
I inevitably would get sort of thrust into one of these things, and I don't know. That's why I kind of like YouTube, because it does, well, still for the time being, allow for some degree of neutrality in its approach. Although clearly it wants to crack down on any kind of what they deem wrong thing. But I guess those days are gone. Now, is there, however, a light at the end of the tunnel, considering, as you said, there's a kind of mirroring of previous events, how YouTube has gone into a panic over this? Or is it probably only get worse? Because we both agreed that this is a kind of war of attrition. But, I mean, here's what I'm also thinking. Cody Wilson, the guy who did the 3D printing of the guns. And
Hatreon. Yeah.
And Hatreon. I mean, he's symbolic of the need for alternatives. And I know he's like a libertarian or something like that. Something along those lines.
I thought his words were crypto-anarchist, but let's not, be pedantic.
Yeah, of that bent. I'm wondering if there wouldn't be an incentive for somebody who has money, who is possessed of, I guess, a more neutral mind, or at least a differing perspective on some of these things, to pour a lot of money into a site like that, a competitor website. But then, I don't know, but this, once again, we're losing the neutrality of YouTube as a kind of platform for, if you want to watch videos about elephants, then go ahead. And if you want to watch Michelle Phan makeup tutorials, although she doesn't make them anymore, it's her own crisis, I guess.
You're revealing your age by saying that.
Yeah, well, those classic Michelle Phan makeup tutorials. You could do that, and if you wanted to watch a Barbarossa video, you could do that too. And I don't know. Maybe it's obviously a type of yearning for that, for me at least, to just get back to that, where we're just get back to business, where everyone's making their own kind of video. You don't have to take these extra precautions not to do X or say Y or whatever. But I guess those times truly are, well, for the foreseeable future, over.
When you're losing $100 million in revenue per quarter from your largest advertisers, you're going to react like this. And, channels like this are a small price to pay for the viability of YouTube as a whole. And that's how I do still think, don't get me wrong, Susan Wojcicki is a very political person, but, a lot of this is still from the monetary angle as well. In terms of, talking about alternative technology, a la Cody Wilson, you have to remember that making a Patreon clone is very different than from video hosting. Video hosting has been notoriously one of the hardest businesses to get into. And one thing I don't see people mention nearly enough is VidMe, I would argue the most viable platform of them all in terms of alternative video hosting, is really just burning VC cash, and they're likely hoping to be acquired or hopefully gain some sort of lit TV sort of standing, and they'll invite refugees for the time being to do that. And there certainly is hope. But, you have to roll with the punches in terms of light at the end of the tunnel. I suspect, the kind of political content we're used to will be welcome back on YouTube 6 or 8 years from now when the political climate has changed, or maybe people have gotten, alt-rightism out of their system. These things are transitory. And just like the reviewers, when they thought their world was ending, they found a safe harbor, and now welcome back today. They're all back on the site, and they're some of the most popular channels of the movie reviewers. These things come to pass eventually.
Yeah.
But in 6 to 8 years, it'll be a whole different, landscape in terms of like the popular political channels. most people on YouTube don't survive for 6 to 8 years, or if they do, they decline in importance. It'll be a very different landscape.
Ray William Johnson.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ironic because he cares more about Facebook these days than YouTube.
Well, from what I understand, that's his big money maker.
It is, yeah.
Well, same thing with Michelle Phan. I mean, all her money's in her company and whatever else the hell she's doing these days. But YouTube obviously was the platform that launched him. And even Average Joe, who, I haven't followed the most recent bits of the aftermath of the crisis of not doing the angry review show, but he seems to be much more interested in Twitch than YouTube these days.
Yeah, that's definitely disjointed from the political purge going on right now. I mean, this is just a general principle. Live streaming is always more lucrative per view than a YouTube channel. And I tell anyone who asks me for advice about growing, a channel online or anything, YouTube is by far one of the best places to acquire an audience, but especially now, but even before, it's one of the worst places to monetize on that audience. You're having a CPM and you're getting $1,000 per million views. That's pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic. And that's why a lot of people are noticing that live streaming is a much better game for them. And obviously it took the impetus of having the sky fall on YouTube and realizing that actually was the impetus for people looking into alternative revenue models. And they saw streaming was a lot better. It's always been the case, but a lot of people are realizing it out of necessity now. And as you're mentioning, Angry Joe is a perfect example. Live streaming is it's a much better platform if you're looking to make money than it is on YouTube. But you got to build up the audience. You can't build an audience for live streaming. You still need a site like YouTube to build an audience in the first place.
Yeah, and I guess that's one aspect that YouTube possibly, well, I guess for channels that don't fall within the criteria of the banned or the frowned upon, they could still build something just like Ray William Johnson had done, Michelle Phan, and even Average Joe, if he doesn't decide to mostly go over to Twitch. But, we used to joke, you and I, about this kind of, we joke about sort of YouTube and all the sort of knowledge that is potentially available there. If you dig deeply enough. And I'd say, well, on aggregate, there's just so much crap on it, you might as well just, blow the whole thing up. And
you're getting your wish.
Well... But no, I'm not though, because that's the problem. That even the interesting good stuff gets blown up, but all the moronic shit.
Oh, you're right. It's the complete opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so the intellectual stuff or the interesting stuff or the stuff that you just couldn't find in many corners of the internet necessarily. That's going and will be gone. But all the shit that I couldn't stand, like the makeup tutorials and the cat videos and whatever, what have you, I mean, that's going to stay because that's what human beings react to.
People are still going to want to consume political content. That demand won't go away, and I know eventually, assuming the purge is completed and people don't try to wing it on YouTube, which in a minute I'll get into why they probably can't wing it on YouTube anyway, even with the monetization, but people will still they still have the desire to consume that content, and I see another like kind of Blip TV scenario with VidMe or any other of these sites, and eventually there will be an ecosystem for that just outside of YouTube. And it's going to be a rough transition. It might take years, but that's how I've seen it happen in the past.
Where do you see a guy like Styx Witchhammer in all of this? I mean, I guess he would fall into the category of sort of, well, frowned upon content. I mean,
yeah, not limited state worthy, but certainly frowned upon content. Now, you got to remember, too, he's a very unique example because he doesn't even run ads. Right, compare that to any of the other people who are trying to run ads and then get demonetized. I've seen that, I would say about 5 to 10% of channels have just been, political channels have been annihilated by this and they just didn't survive. Other people are kind of like overtaxing their audiences now by trying to sell shirts and all kinds of things, and that's the method of survival. But one thing that I never see people mention, and it's important to realize that you might be able to survive that way on YouTube. You might think you're safe because you've cultivated alternative view models, but at the end of the day, you still need traffic and views to bring in new followers. And YouTube won't promote your video as much as if it's demonetized, which makes sense. If you want videos getting a lot of views to also run ads on it, why would they waste time and effort promoting YouTube videos that don't have ads running on them in people's recommended feeds? And so you'll see, and I've already started to see this looking at the statistics, political channels will get less views because they're not monetized. You'll see that trickle down as time goes on, and they'll be able to acquire less and less people simply because if a video is demonetized, it does not get recommended nearly as much as a video that does have ads on it, which makes good business sense, but it's a doom. It's a spell of doom for political channels, even if they do cultivate alternative revenue models.
Yeah. So where does a Sargon of Akkad fit in this? Because he, there's an irony there because he's basically on the left, although he's sort of the father figure.
He's left wing. His comment sections are very right wing. It's very ironic.
Yeah. He's sort of a father figure of the skeptic community these days. You've got the gray streaks in his beard, and got the big beard.
I agree with you, but in many ways he has a brand of his own these days.
Yeah, he's kind of a liberalism guy, but but the thing is that he's doing his own thing, but he recently got hit by the lawsuit. Do you think YouTube is and he's very milquetoast. He's not extreme
by our standards.
The alt-right can't stand him, and there were. He's had his clashes, and I think I've said this before that the next big ongoing drama, which despite false associations of claiming I'm part of the alt-right, but I've said this before that we've discussed this. It was almost a year ago, or at least half a year ago. I said the next big drama conflict will be the skeptics versus the alt-right.
You called it, absolutely.
Yeah, and lo and behold, we're seeing it. And it's interesting that it seems to me that largely, apart from maybe Jared Taylor's videos being put in a limited state, that both the Skeptics Ltd. and the alt-right TM they're basically going to be put in the same boat. I mean, YouTube doesn't want either of the crap.
Exactly.
Because despite having very different views, they all kind of oppose the I don't even know what the mainstream view is these days, Young Turks' view of things, or
Yeah, they're both in separate bastions right now, if you will, and they're both under attack by the side, but they think they're being attacked because they're unique, and I see it as a broad front against all this kind of content. It's definitely a broad front of an approach on YouTube's half.
Yeah.
It's not because anyone's a skeptic, it's not because anyone's alt-right. All this kind of politically inexpedient content has to go.
But here is once again, I hate to bring this up again, but here's the problem is that, in theory at the moment, the Skeptics Ltd. And the alt-right TM are arch enemies, and you have this problem that if you want to gravitate to a new platform, unless the platform has a declared position of neutrality, saying that we'll get these guys and these guys who are at each other's throats, it's going to gravitate towards one end or another. And frankly speaking, I've said this before, I don't trust any platform that has an ideological approach to it. And I guess the closest you can actually come to a non-ideological approach is someone like this, Cody Wilson with his whole anarcho-cat, just say whatever the fuck you want, just leave me alone kind of thing.
Yes.
But if you got a platform that had, skeptic interests, for example, it would be biased, and it might try to engage in control and mouth-shutting and what have you. The same thing with the alt-right. I mean, I'll say this publicly. I don't really trust the alt-right as far as I can throw them, because if they were in power, they would absolutely engage in not identical, but certainly not dissimilar authoritarian measures to control a narrative or whatever, because all of these guys are trying to control the flow of information. So that's the big loss here. Once again, it's the loss of a neutral platform where You can get the Skeptics LT, you can get the alt-right TM, you can get MukTau, you can get whatever. But that's all gone. And here's the thing, that I remember when people kept on harping on about, there needs to be a separate MGTOW site or whatever. Several of these iterations have been attempted, and the ones that still exist barely exist, and there are plenty of just died for lack of attention. Every attempt at creating a MGTOW platform, be it a website, a video hosting site, a forum, it just deflated, basically.
If I may, that's a very different set of circumstances. All these attempts that, MGTOW, we'll just call it site separatism, right? All this was happening when YouTube was still Switzerland. I mean, they were still, the reason those didn't really take on, in my opinion, is that YouTube just was a better forum for that. All the content was allowed to thrive, it allowed for new user acquisition, and there was never a need for it. Like, it's not like when people were trying to make those MGTOW sites, there was also a purge going on YouTube. No, in fact, the community was thriving. I think that's a very different set of circumstances than what's going on today, where you have a group of political channels trying to survive, and at the same time they're being purged as they're finding new places. In the case of MGTOW, there was no purge going on, so there wasn't as much of a need.
I suppose, but if history is an example...
MGTOW also wasn't a big enough demographic to support an alternative site like that. Keep that in mind, too.
Thank the God Sandman came along and saved us all. He was instrumental in getting it out in the mainstream. So doom and gloom seems to be the mood of YouTube, but
for us, the site as a whole do just fine without us.
Yeah. But I mean, you've mentioned sort of YouTube as a symbiotic system, and there's never, as you pointed out, there's never enough entertainment to go around, and even I think everything on YouTube is regarded as entertainment. Sargon is a kind of entertainment. Millennial Woes is a kind of entertainment. All these characters are sort of entertainers. Unfortunately, I feel oftentimes, and even my subscribers view me as such, but so inevitably, as you point out, there will be a new platform that arises from all of this.
Hopefully. But the future is hard to tell.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, because the thing about never having enough entertainment on YouTube, I've never felt threatened by a competitor channel, at least in terms of my own success. I've known that every other channel in the same genre as me doing well is also my success, because it's not like when you're subscribed to a channel, it's a committed relationship. No one channel can meet the average YouTube user's needs, and so you guys would. And not you guys, but any channel that are in the same genre would help each other in a way with the suggested videos. It would send people back and forth, and this is very collectivist in a way, but like the strength of a community of channels would always benefit when any one of them did well. It was very symbiotic, as you're pointing out, and I think generally that principle still applies on YouTube, but it definitely changes the equation when there's limited videos in the mix, major algorithm changes, and also purges going on. But that's also very important to note, too. I don't think, for example, skeptics should be celebrating if an alt-right channel gets banned, because they very much are attached to each other symbiotically, whether they like it or not. And that's the same reason why Sargon has 30 people with pictures of Hitler in his comments talking to each other. You gotta remember, there's a lot of cross-pollination with people, watching videos. And you should never celebrate the demise of another channel in a similar genre.
To his credit, I don't think Sargon is the type of guy.
I hope I didn't accuse him of that, because that was not my intent.
No. I mean, he's the kind of guy that you could call him a free speech absolutist. He would just, he doesn't delete the comments, to my knowledge.
No, YouTube does that.
All the comments from really far, things that seem legitimately of a certain stripe, right? So I don't think he's that. I don't think he would celebrate that. I think it really depends on the personality.
Yeah, my intent was not to accuse him of doing that or anything particular.
He of the so-called skeptics, he seems to, he definitely maintains his stance or his front of, I'm a liberal or classical liberal, whatever. You can fault him for that, but he doesn't seem the type of guy who's petty enough to just sort of laugh and cackle at the downfall of somebody else. There are a couple of other skeptics where I'd say I have my doubts. I think that they would rejoice at somebody's downfall, but Sargon does not strike me as that type of person, I have to say.
Not in the least.
Yeah, to his credit. But yeah, I mean, I guess then that there's no. As far as solutions are concerned, because we've talked about all the bad stuff and the prospects and what's changed and transitions. Not predicting the future, what are possible reasonable solutions to the YouTube crisis given current circumstances?
Solutions for whom?
Well, solutions for the alternative people like myself and the rest of us, and even for the Sargon. Sorry, that name gets tossed around so often. I just sort of instinctively use it.
Osmosis strikes again.
Yeah, exactly. But is the solution just go to VidMe and go to Minds and try to build a platform there? Yeah,
if someone were contracting me to consult with them and give them advice, and obviously this is something I would work with them over many weeks, and it would take a lot of effort and sacrifice. But generally speaking, number one, I would not ditch YouTube immediately. I would go down with the ship for as long as possible because it's still, and I have to emphasize this, it still is the best place to acquire an audience. It still is the best place to reach an audience, even though I really have to caveat that because, YouTube, for example, it's well documented at this point, doesn't let you reach your subscribers. The transition from, political channels existing on YouTube to perhaps political channels existing on both YouTube and on a site like VidMe, or even perhaps just VidMe, it's a market force that is mostly not something any one person can struggle against. You just need to make sure that you go with the flow and time it correctly. So I would encourage people to drive as much traffic, if they are a political channel, to their alternative platforms for as long as possible and effectively as possible, so that you can have both running at the same time. And there's a whole bunch of strategies you can take on that, like such as having exclusive videos on that, et cetera, et cetera. I know a lot of people are wedded to YouTube and have a lot invested in it, but as soon as it becomes a political ghost town, I do really think the viewers will come, because some people still have that near insatiable demand for good, political commentary. And as I've seen in the past, I really do think that would happen given the right circumstances with the purges going on. You just need to make sure you survive the change and go with the flow rather than against it, and obviously not jump off too early. Like, so for example, if you go all in on VidMe right now, I think you will fail. Absolutely.
And I think, there's a point. Unlike being stuck in the Titanic, the metaphorical Titanic, there's no real harm in going down with the ship necessarily.
Absolutely.
If the channels eventually tank and everyone just sort of dies and goes extinct on YouTube, well, whatever benefit there has been, diminishing returns, what have you, but eventually, it sinks, it's in the ocean. Okay, but there's no real direct consequence to that. You're not literally on a ship going down where your life is necessarily threatened.
Well, if it's your primary source of income, that might be devastating. Yeah. I would encourage people to save their money as much as possible.
Well, obviously, but barring that, there's no real harm in just going down with the ship.
No. In fact, there's plenty of time to cannibalize your audience while the ship does go down. You need to make sure you're cannibalizing them the right way, and I hate to use such a term like that, but it's true. If you are being purged, you need to make sure you utilize that audience while you still have access to it as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. And when I say you, I mean channels that are being
not me,
purged.
I barely make any money in. I get very little in the way of very few views and
low Patreon participation.
Low participation, low donation.
We could probably work on that, but that's for another time.
Yeah. But in any event, it's probably more for the millennial woe. I totally confused the roaming millennials. That was
very similar names. I get them mixed up myself.
Completely different people. I don't think millennial woes could transition to makeup tutorials. Who knows?
Well, it was an artist.
Yeah, true enough. But yeah, I think that there's no real issue with going down with the ship, and Yeah, the thing is, even as bad as YouTube is, as you pointed out, it's still the biggest platform out there. And
an eyeball is an eyeball, and a dedicated follower is actually worth quite a bit on the internet. And even before all this happened, I want to remind people YouTube was one of the worst places to monetize an audience. Again, and another thing too on that, YouTube has always been this way, but CPMs, generally speaking, go down over time, not up. I've run the numbers on this, and the rate of content being uploaded to YouTube alone grows by 40% year over year, versus advertising spending, digital advertising spending, in terms of that entire digital advertising spending ecosystem, only goes up 20. And so there's a runaway effect where CPMs drop and views become worth less and less and less on YouTube, and they never really were a good way of making money from traffic in the first place. I've talked about this. Streaming was always better. Patreons were always better, and T-shirts and all kinds of things of tapping into an audience. And this is the kind of thing I care about. I care about finding ways to monetize audiences online. That's an interest of mine, and it's unfortunate that people only sought out these alternative methods and realized the feebleness of YouTube's AdSense only because a crisis was going on, not because of the apparent reality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is your job to understand these things, so it would make sense.
A dedicated and loyal audience is worth its weight in gold, so to speak. And if you were just tapping that by YouTube ads, you were doing it wrong. I don't care Adpocalypse or not, you were doing it wrong. And a lot of these channels that we talked about today were doing it wrong.
Well, yeah. I mean, and here's the thing, though. I'd like to think that the types of channels that are all very niche-y. I mean, look at the recent, I've talked about this before, but the emergence of the various skeptics, LTD, the female versions, just kind of popping up at the right time, clearly trying to capitalize on a trend, making use of obvious human behavioral trends.
Trends to the point that we were predicting them months in advance.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's be honest, Barbarossa, years ago, I remember a video, I think from 2011, about
the return to neo-traditionalism, yeah.
Not just that, there was one, really kind of an ancient video, I think it came out shortly after even I got started, it was eons ago, referencing sort of women's intrusion in comic book conventions and all this stuff, but be as it may, yeah, I mean, you saw the kind of intrusion of women into the manosphere, but what the skeptics provided, interestingly enough, was enough sort of open ground for women of completely vacuous content. Just sort of open up a platform for them and just and basically repeat things that people like Sargon had said.
There you go again.
Oh, sorry, Sargon said eons ago. So
I apologize.
Yeah. Well, popularity will do that to you.
Yeah.
So I mean, they don't. But these things, those channels don't need longevity, because if someone like Romy Millennial is just trying to cash in, and then probably knows that it won't last forever. She's going to get the money together, find some dude that she can mooch off of, and then just kind of cash out.
You don't pull your punches with her, do you?
Well, no. Until she offers that makeup tutorial. There's no reason to.
Actually, if I may interject here very quickly, Barbarossa actually, he predicted it in a different way that I remember very vividly. He was talking about, this was during the days of anti-feminism versus feminism, which I think now is like, 2 YouTube cycles ago, maybe even 3 YouTube cycles.
Yeah.
He was talking about, things politically would heat up and times would get tough, and then, feminism would fall out of favor. He predicted that women would come crawling back, like, we really want to return to traditionalism. And I'm quoting him. I'm not saying this is necessarily my opinion, but I remember him saying that. And you see that with them, creating these channels, like you're mentioning your favorite, like Mrs. Makeup Tutorial, Romy Millennial, Lauren Southern. It's a very popular thing to be a woman denouncing feminism now, and he called it in 2009, I think.
Yeah, or it might have been 2010, but yeah, it was a long time ago. And in many ways, it's been prophetic, but that's only because the man understood or understands female nature and how women operate. And everywhere you look, it's pretty much, we talk about this on a semi-regular basis.
Even Lacey Green abandoned it. I want to get that out before I forget.
Pardon me?
Even Lacey Green abandoned it as per, Barbarossa's prophecy. Let me turn this off.
Yeah. But I mean, this is just kind of well known by now. It's funny how many of the early wisdom of the golden age of MGTOW, it's slightly off topic, but it's a topic that might be of interest to the audience. How that's just sort of taken as a given, but at the time was quite remarkable and revolutionary. I mean, at least it wasn't talked about.
To me, it was unprecedented. I mean, I'm on the younger side, so I couldn't tell you, but to me, it was.
Yeah, absolutely, but that's just the point. You were on the even younger side, and you were exposed to this stuff, and I think that's why as effectively defunct as his channel was groundbreaking, because he was one of the few people that would utter these things, and nobody else was talking about at the time. Not really, not with the vivacity and forwardness that he was talking about with. But now it's a kind of dime a dozen, and I think most people who have been exposed to these, they can break it down. So now our thing, I guess one of our favorite topics is the mercy problem in Overwatch. For those who don't know, Overwatch is a competitive, it's basically competitive.
Team-based competitive game, online.
Basically competitive, even quick play is competitive in some sense. Where an entire character was created basically for women, and in addition to that the women have been given a wardrobe because the character has skins in it. And it's clear that the character is easy to use, doesn't require a lot of skill, and it's basically made for a female audience. And big surprise, the most popular hero amongst women is Mercy. So and we understand that clearly these days as to why. But the whole, I suppose, when Barbarossa first addressed some of these things, it was novel. I mean, people, for example, it wasn't the whole cosplay thing, which has become, women infiltrating comic book conventions and flashing their Jugosauri and what have you. That's
more obvious.
A common thing now, but in 2009, 10, 11, that was kind of new. It was like, what are they doing? That's kind of interesting. So it's interesting how, and we, getting back to the main point of the video, we can thank YouTube for that. YouTube was the platform that, for better or worse, allowed MGTOW content to sort of be propagated, and as a consequence, understanding male and female nature.
Absolutely.
People like Girl Writes What can get big, who's still overall quite good and one of the good guys, or girls in this case. Let's
talk about what you were saying about that, and I'm actually very glad you mentioned it. As much as I like to be focused on strategies and survival, we have to talk about how much of a potential travesty this will be. You compared it to the Dark Ages, and the sheer amount of knowledge that could be annihilated if we're talking about people like Barbarossa, Girl Writes What. If there's never a continual replacement of that, you can see, we could easily plunge into another Dark Age, at least not necessarily as bad as the historical one, but that kind of content can't thrive on a popular platform, just as you described, I believe, in one of your videos.
And I can tell you actually why. I can tell you precisely why it would not thrive, because in theory, all of the knowledge is out there. But you have to be the kind of person, I'm that kind of person, who would look in the sort of dark, dank corners of the internet, who is willing to occasionally wade through a mass of text and wall of text to get these things. The thing about YouTube is the format it allowed people to present ideas in. That in conjunction with the ideas themselves, because the ideas themselves are out there, and I think they have been since probably the inception of the internet. It's just that YouTube allowed people such as Barbarossa to present certain ideas in such a way, and that's what really got people's attention. I don't need to repeat it for the umpteenth time, but without Barbarossa, I wouldn't be here in a variety of ways. He promoted my channel and so on and so forth. But that's the thing. It's the way YouTube allowed for the dissemination of knowledge and information. And, it's always a double-edged sword. When Sandman came about, things quickly went downhill, or maybe more slowly than quickly. But yeah, I think the loss of that type of format and that means of disseminating knowledge could potentially be devastating. because it's just human nature. Very few people are going to pour through the equivalent of arcane tomes on the internet, go to weird websites, and then wade through 7 pages and that paragraph.
Accessibility is king.
Exactly, and it's in his defense, actually, Sandman is right. I mean, one of the reasons why he got popular, he's been stagnating for eons now, but initially at least, growth is just he was accessible. He was accessible for the common man. But you're not going to get that kind of Barbarossa voice, that very forceful New York City accent voice. It's going to just drive home a point by looking at some obscure article online. So, I think if and when the ship goes down, that will be one of the great losses, I think. And, of course, other people like Girl Writes What. And, it's tried and true, and it's really kind of hackneyed. But, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Sargon, and everybody knows I've butted heads with him before, live as well as sort of indirectly. But, I don't like the SJWs. I find the sort of battle against them to be redundant. But, I mean, his whole thing, I wish him luck in that. And I'd honestly, I find them really milquetoast, but I'd rather have the Skeptics LTD and all the people that fall into that camp in a majority than SJWs, because they probably would allow you to sort of discuss ideas. So I'd want a Sargon on this type of platform. And if people like him get banned, I mean, it's kind of procedural, right? I mean, they go for him first, and they go for who's pretty, moderate, and they go for other people who are more extreme, and eventually there's just nobody left.
The first they came, irregular, right?
Yeah.
They first came forward.
Actually, we made a great video.
Oh, yes.
A joke, first they came.
Yeah, I would rather have unrelenting, everything goes free speech people as my overlords than, any necessarily one faction. That being said, if I can't have that, I would settle for a battlefield where neither has the advantage, with kind of like a Switzerland-like state.
Oh, well, yeah, I would agree. But here's the thing, and the alt-right might not like me for saying this, but I actually think that the Sargoys or Sargons would be more free speech than, if they were in charge, than the alt-right would be. I think the alt-right quite possibly would engage in similar, for different reasons completely, tactics to the current powers that be. So I'd agree. You would ideally want a neutral platform where anyone can kind of post and say what they say and say what they want to say. And in this regard, I think Sargon probably is a good exemplar. I mean, as people joke around these days now, I wish him luck in the battles to come and the wars to come.
Yes.
But I hope, I plan, as we talked, I plan on going down with the ship myself. There's no reason not to.
You have a good chance of survival, but we can talk about that on our own time. You're a very unique case.
Well, I don't know how unique I am, but I do plan on going down with the ship. And, I put a lot of time, work, and thought into my channel, and I wouldn't say it's my life, but it certainly is a kind of big component of it. And the channel has shaped me as much as I've shaped the channel in a lot of ways.
A lot of people have had that experience, but I agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's been... I'd say my presence on YouTube has been the most transformative experience I've had, because
You and me both.
Yeah, because I've always had it throughout my life. I have skepticism just about everything I've encountered. As many people know in my kind of YouTube biography, regarding the WQ, the woman question, I always had been skeptical, well, from my mid-20s onwards at least, if not earlier. But never could really put the words to it until I encountered Barbarossa, and it just resonated. Oh, that's what's going on. And then I was able to develop my own ideas. And if you look in the total sort of life cycle of ideas, it allowed me YouTube, and this is sort of the legacy of YouTube as far as it concerns me, to develop a worldview that takes in so many different variables into account, and really have a kind of comprehensive view of the world, to the best of my ability at least, that would not have been accessible had I just not been active on YouTube at all and never been exposed to some of these ideas. And
let's not forget the people who benefited just by watching that transformation happen.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of subs I have that have been with me since the olden days. A lot of people have left because, they felt I'm not MGTOW. I mean, that's the whole point, that in my case, I feel I've actually grown as an individual, intellectually particularly, but just overall.
And that's the kind of thing I like. I don't like people who stay in one transit of intellectual growth and development. Like, so for example, I will say this, and I don't want to get too political or anything, but atheism, I think, is a philosophical decision you have to make. And if you dwell on that gateway, you're missing out on the all kinds of areas you can expand into as a person. Atheism is very much, yeah.
Joe with his average reviews. I mean, that guy kind of, I guess he got himself cornered into a trap there. But
I hope he saved his money. I said that to just about everyone. I hope they saved.
Joe Vargas will be okay, but I mean, there's definitely an appreciation I have for YouTube, because it's been. Our friendship, I wouldn't have met you, then there was CS, Cold Chain, Reactionary, various people.
It's really a beautiful thing, because, the people who created this site, I don't think they ever intended this sort of thing to happen like we're discussing right now, but it did, and it really means something.
Yeah, because here's the thing. I mean, you could say that the internet exemplifies this across the board, and to some extent it does. Pardon me, a sip of water. With the loss of human community in the real world, and the inability for people to sort of connect with each other, the internet became that sort of de facto platform, and YouTube has been fantastically good at that. Of course, it creates echo chambers and what have you, but it's been just an incredible opportunity to meet and get to know all kinds of people, including my very close late friend Adam Jansen. It's been a great opportunity, a great run. I hope the run continues. I plan on going down with the ship, and if it's up to me, I plan on staying on YouTube until I drop dead, but in one form, shape, or another. But I guess whether or not we or anyone else stays on YouTube, that's just a matter of how things go. And as we discussed earlier, it's not looking great overall.
No, I really do think you have a unique survivability potential. But as we discussed earlier, like let's say Sargon's channel were to die tomorrow, that would hurt you. That would hurt you a lot. The web would lose a critical junction, and
it's kind of like an ecosystem.
Yes.
You damage one life form, or you introduce the cane toad, and then you start cane toad clubbing, and it's just not an effective countermeasure. But anyway. You get rid of X organism, and then there's a ripple effect, and I think, in some sense, we're all in this together. So maybe you don't like Sargoi or even Crowton T, and people. My issue with Crowton T is that he just lets his I want to say this quickly off the record or on the record. That my issue with Crowton T, there are a lot of issues, but the main issue is he just lets his emotions get hold of him, and I find it distasteful. And he's all interested in ponying it.
I won't comment on politics, especially in that way.
Yeah, but I'm just offering my own. We're all kind of in this boat. I made a video about this a while back. Actually, maybe it was just, I think last month possibly, that we're all kind of stuck in the same boat, whatever our angle is, because the powers that be they don't really like any of us, and we're all lumped into the same thing anyway. We're kind of all in the same sack of it. We're basically all the same rotten potatoes in the same sack, according to them or the belief. Once again, I wish Sargon luck in the wars to come, as I do with everyone else. no matter how much I disagree with them and what have you.
Yeah. At the end of the day, does a normie care about whether there's a swastika flag with a yellow background or a swastika flag with a red background? They're not very distinguishing.
Yeah.
To take an extreme example.
Yeah.
We're all the same.
And effectively, we according to the normies, we're all running the swastikas, and we're all sort of we're all of that stripe and sort. So it doesn't really.
It's ironic because to be able to distinguish, you actually have to embed yourself so much into it that you become one of them. That's the only way you gain enough. You gain an ability to distinguish the different kinds and different stripes.
It's interesting you mentioned that. The closest I've seen to a normie, or I would say someone on the far left, was this Irish woman, Angela Nagel, who actually can distinguish between things like alt-light and alt-right.
Impressive.
I mean, she's a feminist, and I've been reading her book slowly, and because it's not that interesting, so slowly there. But I mean, she distinguishes. But that's a rarity. It's just not worth investigating for most people.
I admire anyone who can dispassionately investigate, an ideological group without becoming personally involved. And so, for example, one thing that I love reading about and I'm fascinated with is all the different brands of, Marxism, syndicalism, and I want to be able to be competent enough to discuss these things and perhaps even pass myself as one without ever getting emotionally involved in it or even adhering to it. And the person you're describing reminds me of that. And if that's the case, I admire that a lot.
Yeah, and that's good, and it's the reason why I made one of my second most recent video on the whole arcade. Well, it wasn't just about selection theory, because that's just been, it's people let their emotions run wild with that on both ends of the spectrum, and there needs to be a kind of neutral voice entering the scene and trying to clarify that, I think at least. But yeah, that's the thing. At the end of the day, the John Donne quote, the 17th century English poet, no man is an island. That is, for whom the bell tolls. Well, yeah, no man is an island. In this case, above all, on YouTube, because we're all stuck in this, in some sense, together, because we're all part of the evil alternative or whatever.
It's, or go ahead if you like.
Sorry?
Go ahead, I was going to say something, but it seemed like you were not finished.
No, I'm pretty much done.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like, there's that old, I guess it's a Confucian saying that you live in interesting times. These are interesting times.
Yep.
And I don't have all the answers, and anyone who claims that is not being honest with you.
Yeah, these are really interesting times because this platform that's given birth to so much, as we've discussed, is undergoing fairly rapid change, and the battle of the ideologies has reached the point of no return. Everyone's sort of in, and that's the irony. Like I said, it's the moment is sort of the skeptics versus the alt-right, but they're in the same boat. The Wojcicki's and these people, they don't give a shit about them. They're all the same. Oh,
real quick, actually, did you see that MGTOW in particular in Australia is being targeted? Have you seen the stories about that?
I've heard that.
Yeah, I find that very interesting.
I understand, because I'm friends with Coltrane and Reactionary, it just seems to be if you had to pick a country where things are pretty bad, that might take the cake. You might be able to get a cheap kangaroo steak, and I know people like kangaroo meat. I do, but and meat in general, as well as poultry, might be cheap and high quality, as well as accessible. But I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's an outlier and it's geographically so far removed, but it's just. Yeah, the whole feminism, anti-MGTOW, it's completely gone off the rails in that.
It's a unique cauldron. Yeah, Australia in particular, it's so interesting. I know no one really talks about feminism or anti-feminism anymore, but Australia is just such a unique thing going on with that. And you see that expressed with the government openly going after MGTOW videos, and it's such an interesting thing to single out, but that's happening in Australia, and I found that as an interesting coincidence, and also as an example of collateral damage. A lot of other things that are unrelated to the alt-right and all kinds of things will suffer from these changes.
Well, despite the differences, a lot of alt-righters hate MGTOW and a lot of MGTOW hate alt.
Another classic example of people not distinguishing.
Yeah. But that's the thing. clearly, I didn't actually hear the government had undertaken measures, but
I'm not familiar with the matter off the top of my head, but I saw that it was directly requested.
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, you disseminate information of the sorts of the old school stuff like Barbaros, and I mean, even if you were to do like a MGTOW 101 thing or a Sandman or Angry MGTOW, I mean, some of the lowest quality possible in terms of MGTOW content, but nonetheless, it's still a message, and it's a message that can kind of certainly resonate with a large number of men. That's obviously
apparently a dangerous one in Australia as well.
Yeah, because it's a threat to the established order. And here's the thing. I mean, let's face it. When men decide to go MGTOW, they are basically getting off the plantation. That means less tax revenue for the women to buy their pocketbooks and makeup or whatever. That means less welfare for them in the forms of special stipends.
I have noticed, generally speaking, that I'm just going to use the term socialist. Socialist countries tend to be a lot more neurotic about men opting out than, like, for example, ones like the United States. You know, here it's a curious thing, like, oh, they're just losers. In Australia, with any form of welfare state, or even Sweden or Denmark, it takes a whole different character, because you need, as you're saying, men to continue paying taxes, men to continue being productive, men to continue to support women. Because, a socialist country, it's a 50-50 split, right? So you have the people in relationships supporting their partner and also the state supporting them. And it's on a balance, and you can't have one part fall out.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear, though. In Australia, a MGTOW-minded man is going to be viewed as a loser as well.
Of course, yeah, but there's also a threat to the economic model.
I mean, Australia wouldn't use to describe as socialist. It certainly has more socialist tendencies than the United States.
Of course.
But then there was this whole issue with the screening of The Red Pill, which is this film by, your name is Cassie J, a very unremarkable film.
A very non-threatening one, I would say, too.
Yeah, it's just like, it's not even a film that says feminism is bad. It's like they interviewed people from...
It's documentation. That's all I saw in it.
Sort of men's rights activists, and it was just completely taken... It was depicted as... something like that, the Evie Yehuda or something like that from the Eternal Jew, like something just horrific that nobody in his right mind would want to view or film, or allow the audience to view. I don't think anyone has a good answer for why Australia is so bad in this regard, and so far so much worse than other countries, but. It's crazy, though. I mean, to quote Stylos, guys, it's crazy. Between the venomous animals, geographical isolation, and the harpies and the insanity regarding, sex relations there, what? I don't know why anyone would want to live there. I mean, no offense to Australians, but, yeah.
If you care about these things, it would be a very... interesting question, why you'd want to live there if you're aware of these things and you do care about those questions. Absolutely.
The obvious answer is you're born there, you're stuck there.
Of course.
There might be ways out, but I mean, I think gone are the days for the rational, or for the reasonable person, the reasonable man. I mean, Australia has been, to be fair, I was in Overwatch a couple of days ago, and I bumped into a South African, and well, I usually, as I tend to, I offered my condolences for the state of his country, and he was telling
never change.
He asked me, "Am I American?" I said, "Well, not really." And said, "You have an American accent?" I said, "Yeah." So, "Are you American?" I said, "No, I'm South African." I said, "Are you Afrikaans?" He said, "Oh yeah." And we got in this discussion. Our team was crap anyway, so it didn't really matter the conversation. And in any event, he said that he was preparing his papers for New Zealand, but he also knew friends that were going to Australia. So it's a question of scale, right? I mean, Australia might be pretty fucked up, but if you're from South Africa and have the option to move to Australia, it's probably a pretty decent option. It's just that it just doesn't seem like a particularly nice place to live. There's also the climate, which is another issue, but in most places. But yeah, it's this very strange place, and I've not seen anyone come up with a good answer for why this stuff is so out of hand there.
We are drifting away from my narrow field of expertise as well.
Yeah, but it is a fascinating question.
Of course, I'm interested too.
PC culture. I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about. And you remember the conflict I came into, this is when he was much smaller, with that YouTuber, what's his name? I remember his name, but a gaming YouTuber that tried to capitalize on division and then went in a different direction, but completely politically correct. Why it's so bad there, I think that's a mystery that nobody really knows how to answer, because it's bad in Canada, it's bad in the U.S., and it's bad in the United Kingdom, but it just seems to take on these epic proportions in the land of kangaroos, koalas, and cane toads.
What's it with island nations and being neurotic?
Yeah, although once again, United Kingdom, island nation, but not quite as bad as...
They're neurotic about knives, certainly.
They're neurotic about other things, I suppose, yeah. I don't know. It is a big mystery, but, for my money, I think it'll get worse. I've heard descriptions from Melbourne from several people who've been there, who live there, and... Reactionary actually comes from Melbourne originally, and it's anathema to him now. Not too dissimilar way that New York City would be to me. But yeah, it's once again, to quote Stylosa, guys, it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Sometimes that's all you can say.
Well, that's all he can say, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Guys, it's crazy. So, yeah. We kind of drifted off topic there, but there you have it, the close of a video about the current YouTube crisis. But for all you Australians out there, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with your country, but it doesn't sound that great. At the very least, you can go foraging to eat your own witchetty grubs, with the help of the Aboriginals, if possible. Maybe that interests you. Anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope at least this is partially informative to some degree, and also consider asking the audience some of the things that we talked about, the implications, the symbolism of YouTube, what it is traditionally stood for, and how it might have transformed you as an individual, whether you make videos or not, whether you're just a listener, whether you never leave comments, whether you do leave comments. YouTube has had a tremendous impact on many of us, and I think it's something to consider. So anyway, there you have it. I thank my guest, my friend here, a YouTube consultant and media analyst, for offering his insight on the current and ever worsening crisis on YouTube. And as I'm inclined to say, may the gods watch over you, which basically means that you should be watching over yourself, because we all know there are no gods. So everyone, thanks for tuning in, and I will check you out at a later date.
It's always such a pleasure. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Assuming I'm still alive, hail, and well, take care. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.